Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Picking Teams, a playbook for parents. Today we're talking with Kyle Gookins again. This is the fourth time we've had him on the show. He is a wealth of knowledge and information based on his experience as a college coach and a youth coach and recruiting for the U.S. men's national team. Today we're talking about the college recruiting process and how it can be a minefield of parental pressure and misplaced priorities. It really is crucial for student athletes and their families to focus on finding the right fit. This is a place where the student can thrive academically, develop as an athlete, and be truly happy. So we're going to share some tips on how to navigate the recruiting landscape to uncover those meaningful opportunities beyond just the prestige of the school name. So I was sitting on the side of the soccer field watching my rising senior play and talking to some of the other parents just peripherally about the college recruiting process for our boys. You know, nobody wants to divulge too much information because essentially we're all competing against each other for potential spots in college rosters, but we also really care about each other. But it's hard because you hear what's happening with the other kids and you're like, well, why isn't that happening to my son?
The parent game of like telephone and like things that happen on the sidelines is, well, so and so's doing this. And so it's just like, don't look over the fence and like think about what anyone else is doing, whether they're on the other team or on your own team. Is like everyone's journey is different. Even if they're all, if you were to go to say the number, like, and this is kind of a bad example because they're all foreign, but like if you were to go to one of the top teams on the boys side of men's soccer in college and then talk to all the players there about their recruiting journey, they're all different. Every single one of them. However, they're all on that team. So it's like everyone on the youth teams are going to be different. And that's okay. Like everyone develops differently. Everyone has different ideas of where they want to go. And so it's like so easy to get caught up in that world. And I'm sure you had it as a coach too. The coaches get caught up in the world in college big time where it's like, oh, who's recruiting this? What's that? And like this is, and it's like it's easy to get caught up in it, and parents especially. And it's just all noise. Like you're better off just celebrating other people's successes. Like that would be my advice to parents, is like celebrate people's successes. If someone succeeds, awesome. It's not in spite of your child not succeeding.
Right.
And
so it's not a reflection of you either.
Exactly.
It's not. I mean,
it's just like that. They can get really caught up in like oh my gosh, well, so and so's this. Even like I get this, and I'm sure you do, is like parents taking stats and then regurgitating them back to me. Like I have very good friends that are Division I college coaches. Their kids play soccer and they just go and sit in the corner in a chair and like clap. If there's like one expert that should be like, critiquing, and they just sit there and clap and grab them. All right, let's go home right after. They just understand like that's the coach's role. You play, you enjoy it off the field. All right, I'm going to be a parent. So it's like, let the kids just kind of play. Like, don't be too overcritical of every little stat, especially in the soccer world. Some sports are stat driven. So I get that.
My favorite games watching my children play are the games where I'm sitting in the corner and I have my headphones in. And it's like, and I'm listening to good music, and it's like I'm watching a performance. And I can't hear what all of the other parents are saying. Like, particularly now with my kids, or my older son being within recruiting age, and hearing the parents chatter about what schools they're talking to or what schools they're interested in, or, it's my response to them when they ask, well, what schools is your son looking at? What schools are Kimball looking at? My response is, my son's going to look at a school where he can play college soccer as a freshman, potentially, or he has an opportunity to play shortly thereafter, and where he can get a great
education that's going to prepare him for life. And honestly, I mean, the education piece should come first, but those are the two factors. I mean, he wants to play college soccer. He is not focused on any kind of label associated with it. It's like, where can I go where I'm going to have a great college experience? I can play. I have a coach that cares about me, believes in me. I have a team that I want to be around. You know, these are all the things that impact happiness. Being able to say to your friends at a dinner party that your child is playing Division I, or that he spoke to, a Major League Soccer coach in passing, these are the types of things that's just noise. And you have to silence that noise, because you have to look at what is best for your child, and what is going to help your child achieve happiness and calm and a job in the future.
It's so true. And I think that's the piece, is like, when you really break it down, like, this sport is just something, it is a game. So it's just like, it's a conduit to help you through that, and like also learn how to like be in a team and operate in a team and function with other people and those things. It's not the be all end all. So because I totally agree with everything you're saying, because sometimes I'll have clients that will say like, I only want to play at like these schools. And I'm like, okay, that's great. Or like, they'll look down on these other schools. And I'm like, well, why do you not like this? Well, it's smaller. Okay, but you emailed this school that's actually smaller than the schools you're saying are small. Yeah, but they're like a Division I in the ACC. So it's not the size of the school, it's the name of the school. So it's like, I tell some people like, hey, if you want to go, I call them the fancy sweatshirt schools.
Yep.
If you want to go to a fancy sweatshirt school, awesome, go to it. Like, have a blast. Like, but just know like that's one of your big priorities, is like wearing the sweatshirt and the status of going to that school, and that everything else is going to come secondary. We used to say that when I was coaching at UNC Charlotte. It's like, look, because there were other fancy sweatshirts in North Carolina, and Charlotte was kind of like the stepbrother. We're like, if you want to go, like, this is not one of those schools. And so if you want to come and be a part of this program and do what we want to do, that's great. Come be a part. But if you're seeking out that sweatshirt, if you're here just to wear it, then this probably isn't the place for you. But I totally agree with that. Like, I think it's like when you understand, because that chatter happens. I had a client, this is boggles my mind. Both his parents went to Ivy Leagues. They're both orthopedic doctors. Like, they're both very successful in their field. He's a good soccer player, but he was also a good like cross country guy. So he had to choose, like, what am I going to do? I want to play soccer. Well, none of the Ivies did he have a soccer opportunity. He could go there because he's a legacy, and I'm sure he could get in and all that. But he knew he wanted to play soccer. He's like, I got 4 more years, I want to play. Well, there was a local D3. He's in Texas, out of Austin. And he went and visited it. The coach loved him, was like, hey, I want to build the team kind of around you. Met with like the head of admissions. They're like, look, you'll qualify for like basically our top scholarship because of your grades. And then they were like, we've placed 100% of the pre-med students into medical school. So he was like, this is a no-brainer. Like, right. Of course I'm going to come here. Like, why wouldn't I? It fulfills all my boxes. But I had a call with someone else on his team, and the dad was like, I can't believe he's not going to like one of these Ivies. And I said, well, that's his decision to go to this one. And that's really none of your business. That's what I told him. I was like, I'm not here to talk to you about someone else's kid, but he just got a full scholarship to play 4 years of soccer, and his goal is to get into medical school. It's like he achieved all his goals. Like, to me, it was like, this is what an amazing opportunity. And someone's like, I can't believe he's not going to one of these Ivies because both his parents. I'm like, he can go to medical school at those places if he wants. I'm sure he'll get in. He's a smart kid. He like almost aced the ACT. Like,
the prestige factor is mind-boggling to me. The prestige factor, and this whole, I mean, for our athletes, the whole sweatshirt or bust kind of mentality. But the parents are really driving that too. I mean, I think parents
totally agree.
Who are listening, I think you can really be the one that says, like, hey, let's explore what are all these options, because college, the Ivies, the top 50, the top 100 schools in the country, the sweatshirt mentality schools, they are only getting more and more competitive to get in. Okay. So if we can, as parents, say, well, what does this other small, D3 have to offer you? Wait a minute, 100% get into med school. That's pretty significant.
Totally agree.
And oh, you have all this merit aid for my son too, because he's a great student, because he's, like that's a pretty compelling factor. But yet I can throw that in front of some parents and have them tell me that they are incredibly offended that I would even suggest the option. I actually had a parent this past week tell me that a list that I put together was a gut punch. And I'm like, well, there is a bit of realism involved with some of what we do. And, no matter what sport you're playing there, we can reach for schools for sure. But the reality of the situation is when it comes time for, that signing an NLI, which is this week is an NLI signing period, right? First open up. When it comes to this time, do you want your kid to be happy or do you want your kid to be sad? Because if we're only looking at reaches, if we're only looking at prestige, if we're only looking at sweatshirt schools, we've got the sweatshirt or bust mentality, then our kid's going to be unhappy.
I totally agree. And I didn't realize this about, especially Division III. There are more Division III athletes than Division I.
Yeah, there's 450 schools-ish in Division III. And how many are there in Division I? Do you know? Maybe 298, 300? I don't know.
Well, I had a meeting with like the DEI, NCAA, the head of like diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I think like I want to say I have the stats. It's like pretty remarkable. Like I want to say there's like 400,000 student athletes in the NCAA. So in Division I, the sport that kind of has the most athletes, of course, is, football.
Right?
FBS and FCS is like, pretty big. But like Division III, they have 117,000 athletes in men's sports. And in Division I, they have 100,000. And then on which I was like, whoa, like that's eye-opening. And on the women's side, it's actually almost exactly tied. They're off by like 4,000. Like Division I has a few more, and I think they're trying to balance out all the football.
Football. Well, they've got to. Yeah.
And I didn't realize that. I was like, there are so many Division III opportunities.
Well, and the important thing to note about Division III, while Division III does not have athletic scholarships,
correct,
between 70 and 80% of Division III athletes receive some form of merit aid. So to get back to where we started, how important is your academics? Well, when you're, looking at money, there's a lot of money out there. And not only that, we didn't really talk about stacking opportunities in Division with money too. So your academics can help you to get even more of the athletic aid in Division I and Division II.
And the way I coined it to the boys yesterday is I basically said, the better your academics are, the more doors that are opened.
Yep. It's great.
Like just you have more and more opportunities. The more your academics drop, those doors close. There are just some schools that won't. You coach at a high academic Division III. I coach at a high academic Division I. To me, it was the first thing I looked at. Should I even watch this player?
Right.
No matter how much I like them as an athlete, if they can't get into school, and I tried to tell them this yesterday. It's not even just getting into school. Will you thrive at the school?
Right. Can you perform there? Yeah,
exactly. Like that, you're doing your players an injustice if you're bringing them in, and then if the school's too much for them, it's just too rigorous. Like that's not. As a coach, you should try to balance that. So players, it's the same thing. Like you want to find that balance. But I was like, you want to open more doors than close more doors academically. But you want to talk about. I love the scholarship because especially an ideal in soccer, they're equivalency sports, so it's all percentages and it's all every scholarship's broken up in this and what stacking is and stacking. So you were at a D3 is all merit and need based, basically, right?
Correct.
Like aid
That's
was merit aid and need based aid. So
That's
that's how you could stack it. I was at, a few different Division Ones, and I was at a big state school, and I was there for almost 9 years. One person got academic money in my 9 years. So everyone else was either on athletic scholarship or on nothing. And because it's a state school, in state, relatively inexpensive, but still, like, it was, you're dealing with small percentages. Like, it wasn't big. Now, when I went, the other Division One I was at, it was smaller, high academic, a lot more expensive, private school, but you could stack academic aid and athletic aid. And I think so I could make things look like full rides, even though they weren't. Right. If that makes sense. So I knew if I, and this is in men's soccer, at least, even women's soccer, same thing. If you, at a high academic private school, if you're hitting certain academic goals, whether your test scores and your GPA, you can qualify for so much merit aid. So what that is, for the person who doesn't understand the difference between aid, like there's athletic aid that comes out of the scholarship 9.9 or however many scholarships that school has, comes out of that budget, but then you can stack academic aid on top of that to make up the difference.
Right.
There are some schools out there that can do it, and then there are some schools that can't.
Correct.
It's like school by school. So it's important when you're going through this, and if you have good grades and you're, talking to a high academic school, to ask them, like, are you guys able to stack? Like, I always tell boys that, I'm like, ask early so I usually tend to know, so I'm like, they can stack or they can't stack. So like, just so you're aware, they're stacking or not stacking. So the only caveat with that, because this happened to me as a coach, is if you're at a place that stacks and your GPA drops, this is when it gets tricky. Either the school then honors the merit aid and it counts against the scholarship budget, or you're on the hook for it.
Yep.
So like, that's really important if you're
what do you mean on the hook for it? When you say you're on the hook, the student is, they have to pay back the school?
They would be responsible for that, the difference in them. So say you had, you were getting, these are just made up figures. Say you were getting $15,000 merit aid and your scholarship was $20,000 athletic. Well, your GPA drops below that threshold. And then, they basically say like, all right, going into next year, that, 15,000 merit aid is either going to count against the scholarship budget on the athletic side, or as a coach, I went to the player and said, I'll do this for 1 year, but if you don't pick it up, I'm going to count it against you. You're going to have to pay it. Like, and luckily he did get it back up. Like, he was like, I'm giving you a second chance to fix this. So, but I was like, I met with his parents and was like, here's the reality. Like, I'm giving him a second chance. And if he doesn't bring his grades up, then I don't want to reward that behavior. So he did very well. He made a mistake. He's a college athlete, but that's how that merit aid and the stacking can change.
Well, there's so many different layers to that too. I just want to break it down for anyone who's listening. So it's not that the student, if their GPA drop, that they have to like repay. It just means in the next year, they're going to be having to foot the bill a lot. It's going to be a lot more expensive bill than they thought they were getting into. So that's one piece of it. But with you taking care of it out of your scholarship budget, if you didn't have any extra scholarship money, you only had the 9.9, you would not have been able to do that for him. Am I right?
That's correct. That is exactly right. Luckily, I had it, and it wasn't like a huge dent out of the budget. But so I mean, I could have very easily just said, "Oh, I'm sorry, you've got to pay that $15K next year. That's an extra $15K you weren't expecting to pay."
Right.
Like, that's when it comes back to like how important the academic side really is. It's like so important.
Yeah.
But he did change, and he was actually like a great. He completely changed that year as a person and as a player. So it was like a success story, but that little dip was like, oh man, all right, it was a reality check for him.
Yeah, I'm sure we both got a lot of fun success stories.
Oh my gosh, I think I could talk for like 12 straight hours about unique success stories. I'm sure you can too. Those are the most fun ones to talk about, right?
Yep.
So don't you think that parents can create their own success stories at home by paying attention to their child's happiness? I'm not trying to create the happiness for them and make life easy in any way, but by paying attention to the happiness and keeping them in places where they're happy and they're challenged and they're excited and they're stimulated and all of that.
I totally agree with you. And I think it's like you have to break it down and just look at are they happy in what they're doing? If they're unhappy in it, okay, there needs to be a change. But if they're happy in doing what they're doing, keep them in it. And then if they keep progressing, then maybe they're happy at the next. It's find out what truly makes them happy and feel valued and belonged. And I always tell these stories because I went to a Division II state school and played soccer, but the guy, one of the big alums that I worked for, is the Stanford head coach. He went to a Division II state school, and he's the Stanford head coach. My wife works for one of the biggest tech companies in the world, Google. She went to Winthrop University as an education major. So it's not always linear, and it's more about the experience and feeling valued. And I think that's such are you valued at a place? Is it matching your mission and values? And do you feel loved and belong? I think that should be the top priority. And then okay, what letters are after the name of the school is the next piece. But yeah. And I think it's the same in youth sports. It's the same thing. Sometimes it's smoke and mirrors.
Yep. I mean, I think that valued piece is so essential, because when we strive for the elite schools with our kids who are great students in their, in their home territory, maybe they're top 5%, maybe they're top 10%, then they wind up getting into these elite schools. Okay. Cause we pushed them there. Well, they're no longer top 5% or 10%. The top 5%, 10% have now spread out, and your child is suddenly feeling perhaps a little insecurity about their place in the school academically. Yeah. Okay. And that is not an environment that necessarily fosters growth. It fosters competition. It fosters the fight to get it back ahead. It fosters a lot of mental health challenges, because suddenly they're not going to be getting into medical school because they're not able to pass the intro to chemistry class because they're there with the top 5% or top 2% sometimes.
Yeah. And then it's that scarcity mindset, right? It's that scarcity of well, I have to do this and cling to this. This is the only way. It's I couldn't agree more. It's so true. I think especially in, I think you said it early on, of people thinking well, the grass is greener at these places and doing this. And I've been fortunate to coach at a lot of places and clubs, and they're all very similar. Everything's very similar, training locations, it's all very similar. And
the soccer's very similar too.
100%,
right?
100%.
The same way. There's still intense games. There's still games that you blow out other opponents. Yeah. I mean, it's still, it's playing a sport, and it's about what you gain. It's about the values that you learn through that experience. And again, back to the kid that's going to the small private school, and he will thrive in that environment. He will become the cream of the crop there. He will, again, get into medical school. Like your wife went to Winthrop. Now she's at Google, and would that have happened if she had gone to Princeton? Probably not. I mean, we don't know.
Point. Yeah.
But I know a lot of parents get stuck on, the networking opportunities at these prestigious schools. The research shows that the ranking of your school has less to do with a student's future success. What actually is much more impactful is the quality of a student's engagements, no matter where they go. So if they're involved in something and they're thriving in what they're involving, they are more likely to be successful later on. That's how I take it. And that's where I see college athletics falling in. Let's find a place where these kids can be successful, be a part of something great, not sitting on the bench, but they're actually participating. If they are sitting on the bench, then obviously we want them to be, good team players. Somebody's got to sit on the bench, but let's not target that as our goal. And I want to end with one thing, because we've been talking for a while, but I have one of my student athletes that I'm working with now. I could not get him off of a couple sweatshirt schools. Couldn't get him off. And I've been working with him for 2 years, and he's like, I'm going to get there. I'm going to get there. I'm going to get there. So this was a sport. This is, I'll just say it's tennis sport. Tennis is a sport. So ranking is really important, right? So I'm going to get my ranking up. I'm going to get my ranking up. So these coaches will look for you. First of all, there's only so much time we have to get a ranking.
Yeah.
I love the ambition to get it up. I know what the probability chance is of getting it to where you need it to go. So let's at least have some backup options in place. And let's communicate with these backup options so that, they become real viable solutions to this. Like, you have a place to go. Refuse. It will be this school, or bust them out. And now he's at the point where he's applied early decision without coach's support to a team that he's hoping to get coach's support in the next month. And the anxiety is unreal between him and his mom, and their, and I feel terrible for the way that they're feeling. I know it's a horrible feeling, but we didn't have to come to this point. There were plenty of other coaches that would have loved to have talked to him at great schools where he could thrive and really, really become something from there. So, yeah.
I think even to bring it back to like where we started, like what your tagline was for like pushing people into like thriving places and in being engaged and all that, like in the college, I would say the same in youth sports. Like, I would say that's the same exact thing. Like, you need to be engaged in your team, like an active member, thrive, like no matter the level or the where it is or the prestige of it, like that's the biggest piece, I think. And I think that is so important, especially in youth sports, is that, because like what the anxiety you just described is the conversation I had with my old roommate. He's having the same anxiety over a high school.
Yeah.
And I feel for him. I'm like, man, it's only going to get more. He got really upset when I told him, well, there's only, this many scholarships in men's golf. He was like, what? I was like, yeah, like, I hate to tell you this. Like, yeah. I was like, the nice thing is you're in California. There's a lot of state schools. They're really relatively inexpensive. Like, I would start, looking at those things. And he was like, oh, like, I was like, once again, it was like a gut punch, I think, to him. Because he was like, wow, like, look at all these private schools. Like, here's a tuition. This is what it's going to cost. Hate to tell you this. So I love that. I love that stat because it is so true. It's like, even outside of sports, I think, like being engaged, feeling valued, like being supported, and like being able to thrive. Like, of course you're gonna do better and be more successful. Like when you put it like that, of course you are.
Yep.
Like, makes perfect sense. So I love that. I'm going to tell my wife about that, because that's like literally her whole job is about belonging and inclusion. Like, that's what she does. So when I tell her that, she'll love that story.
Thanks for tuning in for today's play. Join us next time to hear more insights from another outstanding coach. Until then, remember, as you navigate the ups and downs of your child's sports journey, you're not just picking teams. You're building character, fostering resilience, and creating lifelong memories.